Hello. Okay, so we're going to try to install AIF Fabric on-prem in a single box configuration. So this will be the first version of AIF Fabric on-prem that will be released, where we have a bundled Kubernetes cluster. We install it on a single node, um, and users can then deploy and run their models just like they can in AIF Fabric Cloud. In a couple of months, we'll also have flavors of AI Fabric that can be deployed into various other environments, such as Azure Kubernetes Service, OpenShift, Red Hat, and Docker Enterprise, and these sorts of managed Kubernetes environments. But for now, for the single box, we bundle it all together into a single installer. And what I'm going to try to do is do an end-to-end installation and get an ML skill deployed within 1 hour. So hopefully we'll be able to do that, assuming nothing goes wrong. I'm also cheating a little bit because I already have my orchestrator set up. So you'll need orchestrator 20.4. You'll need a SQL server, which should be the same SQL server as the orchestrator is using. And you'll need a VM to deploy AIF Fabric onto. Okay, let's get started. So I've already made a few of these machines. So what I'm going to do is just copy this machine, but I'll talk you through the configurations we're going to use. So I'm creating my VM on Google Cloud, but you can create it anywhere, whether it's Azure, AWS, or directly from a hypervisor, and you can actually install it on bare metal machines as well. But okay, so the first thing I want to do is choose my machine type. I'm going to choose the N1 standard 8. This has got 8 CPUs, 30 gigabytes of RAM. That should be more than enough to run the AIF Fabric application, as well as deploy a few models and run a few training jobs. I'm also going to add a GPU so that we can train on GPUs. We also need to add our operating system. We've done all of our testing on Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. AIF Fabric, in theory, will work on other Linux distributions, but this is the one we officially support and have tested. So that's what we're going to choose. I also have 100 gigabytes is enough for the boot disk, but I'm going to add a couple more disks. So let me just add this first one. I'm going to delete it. And these disks can be about 200 gigabytes. Should be more than enough. Next thing I want to do is just make sure my networking rules are all in place. So here I've got some networking tags that have been created to ensure I'm able to communicate with this machine from my local machine. The other thing you want to do is on GCP, if you create a VM, the external IP by default will be ephemeral. So you may want to change that to a static IP. Now, to be honest, I've used the ephemeral IPs in the past, and it never seems to change, but just to be sure, it's better to set up a static IP. And okay, that's pretty much it. So we've got our network rules, we've added our disks, we've added our Ubuntu operating system, a GPU, and the machine, and now we're good to go. So I'm going to create this machine. So the next thing you're going to want to do is SSH into that machine from your local machine. You can do that loads of different ways. If you've downloaded the gcloud client, for instance, you're able to just run the gcloud command to access the machine. I prefer to use PuTTY. So I just generate public-private key pair using the PuTTY key generator. Save the private key. Copy the public key. Should be good. Okay. Now log into this machine. Just add this private key. And now that's us, we're in. Now what we want to do is run the replicated COTS installer on this machine. And replicated is a vendor we use to do all of our application lifecycle management for AIF Fabric and to create our installer and all of that stuff, specifically for Kubernetes-based applications. So you won't ever need to see the replicated vendor portal, but just for context, these are the various different versions of AIF Fabric we have in these different channels. We're going to do the one box installer and with an embedded cluster, and so this is the command we're going to use. But as I said, we have other versions of AIF Fabric, such as installing onto an existing open source cluster. This is in development at the minute, but this is what we're releasing first in July. So now we just need to run that command. And this will take about 10 minutes to install. I'll fast forward on the video so you don't have to sit through all of this. One thing to note here is that you can see Ceph being installed. Ceph is what we use to create an object store out of the, the storage provided by the VMs, the disks that we created. It's very important that the disks that you create, um, that you add when you're creating your VM, are unformatted, because Ceph expects unformatted disks. If you format the disk, this will fail. So that's something I forgot to mention. It's super important. Whenever you're creating your VM, don't format the disks. Okay, we're done. That took under 10 minutes, which is good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to log in to the COTS admin to install the AIF Fabric application itself. So you'll see here, after the installation completes, that we have this URL with the COTS admin. So we're just going to want to copy that in there. Just want to check real quick. See if one of the also printed. I'm just checking to make sure that the namespaces are all created. So okay, this this is a bug that will fix itself. Um, okay, so you don't have to worry about that. If that happens, the AI Fabric namespace not being created, you just run the config again. This is a bug that will be fixed in the next few days. Okay, so now, as I said, this is the COTS admin. So this is where we go um, to see what we do next. And it'll ask you to, to, to secure your connection. We're not going to do that because we want to do this in an hour. So you can just keep skipping this. And then the next thing you're going to see is you're going to be asked for a password. And so you'll find that password here. You go to the documentation. If you lose this, you'll see in the documentation how to reset your password. The command to do that in case you do lose it. Once you have your password, you log in, and then the next screen you're going to see is going to ask for a license. So what you'll need to do is ask one of the AI Fabric PMs or engineers to give you a license that we generate in a replicated vendor portal. And it'll just be a YAML file. So if I go back here and upload that YAML file that I just downloaded. Okay, and now we're going to configure AI Fabric and install the application. So you'll see this screen, and the first thing you're going to want to do is add the ingress host, and that should just be the same IP as a machine that the VM that you're on. So literally, all you need to do is enter the IP address. Then you want to enter the SQL Server host and credentials. So again, you'll need to have your SQL Server set up, and you'll need to have admin access to that SQL Server. And if you haven't already, you'll need to create the databases. That will come to you in a minute. Now, again, soon in the installer, if the databases aren't created, we will automatically create them within the installer itself. But for now, you're going to need to manually install, or you're going to need to manually create those databases. And here, make sure you base64 encode the password before you enter it. And then enter your orchestrator endpoint. It's the orchestrator that we're going to use is here. Just make sure you don't include HTTPS and 3. And then you need to generate your identity token. So how to get your identity token? You're going to go to the same orchestrator URL, and you're going to say /identity /admin. And you're going to need to log in as an administrator. To the host tenant, so make sure it's host. And go to installation access token, generate a new token, copy that token, and then enter that token in here. Then the next thing, we're installing the OneBox version enable test path. This doesn't really matter. This is only really needed for testing without having to get a token every time we send a request. Deploy custom releases. So this won't be required for a customer, but for now, because we're still in development mode and things are changing really, really quickly, I'm going to change these to other versions, but best practice will be that the customer just enters the version of these that we provide them as default. Again, it may be that if you're installing this in the next few weeks, you're going to use custom versions that we provide you as opposed to what's in the default fields here. But the expectation for the customer will be that they won't have to worry about that. And then the last thing you can do, as I mentioned, you need to create these database tables in the SQL Server. These are just going to be the default names of the databases. You can change these if you want, but you need to make sure that you have databases with these names in the SQL Server that you're connecting to. Okay, and that's it. Now, if we click continue, you're going to get this pre-flights check. That's going to come up with some warnings. You don't have to worry about these. These are going to show up. So just click continue, deploy and continue. And now the COTS install is deployed. And the next step is going to be the application is going to need to install itself. So now we go back here. You're going to see something called provision a pod. If you type kubectl get pods, you're going to see a pod called provision, and that's what we need to run and finish. So whenever this finishes, that's when AIF Fabric is going to be installed. So if you want to see the progress of this, and this will take a while, but if you want to see the progress of this running, as it's running, just type in kubectl logs -f and then the name of that pod. And you'll be able to see here it running through the installation. As I said, this takes some time. It can take between 20 and 30 minutes. So what I'll probably do is fast forward this again in the video so you don't have to sit through it all. But in the meantime, I'll just really quickly show you what we need to do next in Orchestrator. So if I go back here and you go to the host tenant in the orchestrator that you're connected to, and you see all of the tenants that have been provisioned. And I'm going to create a new one. Anton single box demo, and I'm going to put in my information here so that I can log in to this tenant. And not that it's important, but I can just allocate some licenses. I have that running already. I'll do it tomorrow. So now this brand new tenants ready, and whenever AI Fabric comes up, we're going to provision an AI Fabric tenant that's bound to this orchestrator tenant. So the concept of a tenant extends from orchestrator to AI Fabric, and that's how we connect orchestrator to AI Fabric. It's a tenant to tenant connection. Now if we go back to the terminal, as I said, this is going to take a little while. Another few things to touch on, and again, this will all be available in the documentation, but whenever you are installing AI Fabric and you aren't using an existing orchestrator that's been connected to AI Fabric previously, what you're going to have to do is in the orchestrator web.config, you're going to have to copy and paste this into that config file for orchestrator and insert it at the end of the app settings section. So again, in the web.config for orchestrator, you copy and paste this in at the end of the app settings section. Super important to do that, and as mentioned, you need to create these database tables in the SQL Server. Hopefully in the near future we will automate this, so if the tables don't exist, the AI Fabric installer will create them automatically, but that's not what happens today. So make sure you have these database tables. This isn't an issue if you're connecting to an existing AI Fabric tenant such as or orchestrator tenant such as this one that loads of people are testing on. So because loads of people are testing on this, all of that's already been done. The other thing that's worth mentioning is if you get an error here during this installation, what you're going to want to do is run run the following command, and I'll just do it in this terminal because we'll keep that running. But the command will be kube control delete job provision, and if you run that, then after you finish that, it'll say job provision has been deleted. And if the issue was with your config, all you need to do is change the config to fix whatever problem you had. Maybe you used one of the wrong releases, or maybe your orchestrator endpoint was incorrect, or your identity token was incorrect, or anything like that. So then you can run that again and start the deployment again. But you just need to make sure before you do that you run this command, because this isn't done automatically. So kube control delete job provision. Okay, I'll stop talking now and I'll speed this forward to the end so that you don't have to sit through it all. Okay, we're in. Wonderful. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you're going to come to this authentication page, and you want to make sure that you're logging into the host tenant, and you want to provide the admin credentials, the same admin credentials you used to the orchestrator host tenant that you're connected to, and you log in. And now you're going to see a list of all of the tenants available on that orchestrator. And I can't remember what we called the when we created. Let's see. Anton single box demo. Okay, so it's provisioned an orchestrator. As we'll be able to see here. Okay. Let me try that again. There we go. I don't know what was going on. Okay, so this is the orchestrator tenant, Anton single box demo. Now, over on AI Fabric, we want to provision the AI Fabric instance for this tenant. So we click provision. And it was successfully provisioned. Awesome. Okay. Now we can log out here and we can log back in. And here we are. This is very pixelated. We need to fix that. But now we're in AI Fabric, and I'm going to create my first project. And I'm going to upload my first model. I'll use an email classification model that will be trainable. And I will also upload my first data sets. And while they're doing that, I'll show you a few more cool things that are worth noting. I go back to the app. Let's see here. These are still uploading. So you can see my folders, my data set started uploading. It's great. Another thing to note, our out-of-the-box models aren't available yet, but it is actually part of the installer, and it's just a bug that's being fixed at the minute. So you can see here out-of-the-box tool installer, and what that's going to do is run intermediately run a cron job to go and pull the latest versions of all of the out-of-the-box models uh, from a secure blob store, and you can think of that as being just like the activity feed in Studio that's constantly live and updating via the NuGet feed. This is how we access all of the out-of-the-box models on AI Fabric is by running these cron jobs that are going to look for all of the new versions, so that a customer on-prem is getting the same experience as a customer on cloud. They're able to see all of the out-of-the-box models that are available. And as I said, that'll be coming really soon. That's something that should be finished and available at the end of this current sprint. It's upload super slow. Apologies, it's my bad internet connection. Finally, let's just see if this is uploaded. Okay, validating. Validation successful. So let's um, deploy this as a skill, see if it works. And then also while we're doing that, let's run a training job on this data set and using the GPU. You'll see that even though we've got quite a bit running here, still have plenty of memory, plenty of RAM available, so you should be able to do quite a bit even with just these deployments. On AI Fabric, the high availability version that will deploy to existing Kubernetes environments such as OpenShift, AKS, Docker Enterprise. In those cases, it'll be highly available and it'll be multi-node. This is a single node. You can technically add a node here using replicated, but we don't support this officially because the version of AIF Fabric that comes with the bundled Kubernetes, we only support single node deployments because this is supposed to be for smaller deployments of AIF Fabric that don't need to scale, and in which case we don't want to ask a customer to set up a Kubernetes cluster just for this sort of single box version. We bundle the Kubernetes, but if it's going to be highly available multi-node version, then our recommendation is to deploy to an existing cluster, and that's why we're working on versions for AKS, OpenShift, Docker Enterprise, and future AWS Elastic Kubernetes EKS, and obviously GKE and VMware Tanzu as well, and any other Kubernetes distributions that our customers are asking for. So let's just see how this is going. It's queued because, and unfortunately, we don't have the most informative statuses here. So queued, this is saying queued, but really what's happening is just building the image to run this training job. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. Job's been scheduled, the ML skills deploying. Probably just a few more minutes. Oh yes, the reason this isn't working is because we're in one box and we don't install Kibana. So that would explain that. Apologies. So the one box deployment, we strip away a lot of the bells and whistles, so that it's a lot less resource hungry, because obviously it's being deployed on a single node. We also, on the one box version, we don't replicate the pod. So by default, on the cloud version of AIF Fabric and the highly available on-prem version, we replicate the pods by default. So we effectively have two versions of the ML skill behind the single load balancer on two different nodes. So if one dies, you can always hit the other one, and you can also parallelize your requests. But the single node version just has a single pod per ML skill. The other thing is in Orchestrator, so you'll still see ML skills down here, which will give you a read view of the skills available. This is probably going to throw an error, and this is something we're working on. We'll provide a fix for. It's actually in the documentation somewhere. You'll be able to see it here because we have this called out as an error that's happening. Yeah, you'll see in the documentation how you can fix that, but we'll work on that. A lot of the efforts going on right now from a development standpoint as we work towards GA is really around error handling to the installer. So whenever something goes wrong in the installer, that it's not up to you to investigate and fix it. That automatically the installer will be robust enough that it can deal with the errors. And that could be that, such as what I mentioned earlier about the SQL databases. SQL databases don't exist, the installer should create them. If something does already exist, then the installer should ignore it and not throw an error. So those sorts of things really around civilizing everything and making it more robust. But end to end, things are working. So this is so cute. And there we go. The model is now available and deployed. So that's great. We got that working. And if you fix that error, you will be able to see that in here as well. And now we just want to make sure that the pipeline runs. I know we had an error with GPUs that we're fixing as well. I don't think the current version that I'm running here actually has that fix. There's a chance that won't complete, but at least the ML skill got deployed. To the usage portal, charts. Okay, I'm not going to wait in this any longer. It looks like everything's working. We might still have an error here with the GPU, but that's going to be solved with the latest version of the deployer or the trainer. Sorry. So with that, it was way over an hour for me. In fact, it's 1 minute off 2 hours. But I'm going to cut down the video so you don't have to sit through all of this rambling. And hopefully it's useful. So between this video and the documentation, I hope that you're able to go through the entire install experience yourself. Feel free to share it with customers so they get familiar with the steps in the process, and let us know on Help AI Fabric Slack channel if you have any questions or issues. Goodbye.